The Last Word with Ali Velshi starts right now. Hey, Ali.
I don't know if you've intended it, but your shows this week for the last few days have been a remarkable lesson for anybody who's a homeowner who's planning to renovate anything on what not to do. I mean, like just the basic lessons about, hey, talk to two contractors.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like everybody should have a bid contract. Like never just, I mean, if you've used the same guy for a long time, that's fine, but the same guy might have been doing your particular pool, but now you're doing the actual reflecting pool of the United States of America. May not be the same job for the same guy.
Make it an actual reflecting pool. And if it's $1.8 billion, have a process for it. And I don't know what kind of pool you have at your home, but still.
All of the above. Thank you for some great shows. You have a great weekend. We'll see you next week.
Thank you, Ali. Thank you. You too.
Donald Trump is back in the United States, and of course, his China summit was a great success. But while Trump walked away with a flattering reception, a nice dinner, and not much else, China walked away with something far more consequential, an uncertainty that they sought about the United States' position on Taiwan. Yesterday, the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, sat down for an interview with NBC News where he stated clearly that the U.S. policy on Taiwan had not changed.
U.S. policy on the issue of Taiwan is unchanged as of today and as of the meeting that we had here today. It was raised. They always raise it on their side. We always make clear our position, and we move on to the other topics. We know where they stand, and I think they know where we stand.
We know where they stand, and I think they know where we stand. End quote. Today, Donald Trump got on Air Force One and introduced something very different.
But the 1982 assurances that President Reagan gave said the United States would not consult with China on arms sales to Taiwan. So it sounds to me like you have consulted.
Well, I think 1982 is a long way.
It was.
That's a big far distance away.
You dispensed with them?
No, I didn't say anything about it. We discussed the Taiwan, the whole thing with the arms sales was in great detail, actually.
In great detail. That was Trump saying, I didn't say anything about Taiwan, only to say mere seconds later, we discussed Taiwan in great detail. Maybe Trump forgot. Maybe Trump misspoke. Maybe Trump was lying. But China absolutely knows where it stands on Taiwan. There's no confusion in Beijing. Taiwan, which China considers a breakaway province, is China's #1 strategic priority, and it has been for decades. That was arguably China's #1 wish list item coming out of the summit, creating uncertainty in America's commitment to Taiwan. And Trump gave it to them in exchange for nothing. Trump got rolled by an authoritarian targeting a Democratic ally of the United States again. It used to be that when the United States government spoke, everybody listened, allies, markets, adversaries. Now Trump has rendered not only the words of an American president meaningless, but also the words of his Secretary of State, his administration, and everyone. Because Trump thinks power is performance, he tried to show that he was tough, not by standing up to China or winning on Iran, but by attacking New York Times reporter David Sanger, who asked a question about Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu's war of choice in Iran.
I had a total military victory, but the fake news, guys like you, write incorrectly. I actually think it's sort of treasonous what you write. You should be ashamed of it.
There's another war.
I actually think it's treason.
Wow. Trump thinks he looks strong, lobbing a big, tough word like treason at a reporter whom he knows will not argue with him, but will continue to pursue his questioning in a professional manner. Like professional wrestling, it's all fake. Total military victory in Iran? It's day 76, and Iran is still using its brand new weapon, the Strait of Hormuz, against us. And Trump has no idea what to do about that. What exactly did Trump bring home from his two-day summit with the Chinese president? No commitment from China to help open the Strait of Hormuz, no breakthrough on Iran. He did get an agreement for China to buy American planes. The New York Times reports, quote, Boeing landed an order for 200 aircraft, a deal that Trump highlighted in a Fox News interview last night, but shares in the plane maker fell sharply in pre-market trading on Friday because the number was short of analysts' forecasts of at least 300 planes. The Atlantic reports, quote, a couple of trade deals have apparently made Trump happy enough to step aside and let Xi pursue his global agenda. Like the Chinese emperors of old, Xi has used the lure of Chinese wealth to reinforce China's power. This is how a president who has long insisted on American strength and a tough line on China consigns the country to a weaker future, end quote. We've seen this pattern before. Remember the Trump-Putin summit in Alaska last summer? Trump literally rolled out the red carpet. Massive spectacle, personal flattery, all the TV news cameras were there, and afterward, nothing changed. Trump was not able to deliver half a year late on his promise to end Putin's war on Ukraine on day one, as he promised during the election. Putin's war on Ukraine continues, by the way, as Russia attacks civilians, including infants and children, and devastates infrastructure. Today, at least 24 people were killed in Kyiv, including 2 children. According to Kyiv's mayor, dozens of others were wounded, including a 1-month-old baby. But just last week, Donald Trump claimed progress, writing that talks between Ukraine and Russia were, quote, continuing on ending this major conflict. We are getting closer and closer every day, end quote. Closer and closer every day to the war that he was going to end on day one, to the war that wouldn't have happened had he been president, apparently. Trump, the reality TV guy, wants to win attention in the moment. It's always about the moment, which is why he declares victory every day of this war, now in its 76th day. China isn't bothering to win the moment. China's playing to win the future. The Wall Street Journal reports, quote, for Trump, it's all about opening China's market to American business and reciprocal trade, reviving a U.S. policy that he scrapped in his first presidency. Chinese leader Xi Jinping, meanwhile, wants strategic stability, a predictable relationship in which Washington doesn't impede Beijing's economic and geopolitical rise. Trump is trying to manage the chaos he created. China is trying to shape the 21st century and is doing it with relentless discipline. The Wall Street Journal continues, quote, the U.S. could ban every Chinese-made product, but those products would keep gaining market share abroad, threatening American leadership. This calls for a joint response by all market-based democracies to Chinese industrial policy. But U.S. allies' willingness to coordinate with the United States on China, which was never high to start with, has eroded further under Trump. China is not just competing in markets, it is shaping markets. Meanwhile, the United States is alienating the allies that it would need to compete effectively with China. America's greatest superpower has never simply been its military force, yet the United States spends more on defense than the next 44 countries combined. America's true superpower was its alliances, NATO, NORAD, Five Eyes, the Pacific Alliances, economic coalitions, the fact that allies believed America meant what it said and would live up to its commitments. Trump has spent years weakening those structures by attacking allies, creating uncertainty, hollowing out trust, and as a result, the world's most powerful country increasingly behaves like the world's smallest superpower. And once again, an authoritarian leader walked away with exactly what he wanted, while Trump came home declaring victory. Time magazine describes Trump as cowed in China. The most enduring image from the entire visit is the 2 leaders standing outside the Ming Dynasty Temple of Heaven, with Trump remaining curiously tight-lipped as reporters inquired whether they had discussed Taiwan. China is beautiful, Trump offered instead. But the optics of the U.S. president, for whom belligerence has long been a badge of honor, appearing awkward and cowed, is a stark illustration of the shifting balance of global power. So I've got a new acronym tonight, TGRET. Trump gets rolled every time. This week was China's turn to roll him. Leading off our discussion tonight is Chrystia Freeland, who previously served as the Deputy Prime Minister of Canada and the Minister of Finance of Canada. She is also a longtime journalist. Chrystia, welcome back to the show. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Great to be with you, Ellie.
You've been at these tables, you've been at these summits, you've been at these meetings. You understand the importance of it. I think this was probably supposed to be the most important summit of Donald Trump's entire tenure. Give us your take on what happened.
I think an acronym you could use to summarize not just this meeting, but everything leading up to it is Make China Great Again. When you look at the impact of the Trump presidency, the real winner has been China, and the loser has been America's allies and America itself. And what's really extraordinary about it, Allie, is President Trump was elected beginning in 2016 in large part because he was really one of the first US leaders who recognized the way that China's entry to the WTO was contributing to the hollowing out of the US middle class. One of his promises to American Rust Belt workers was he was going to fix it. But instead, what we see he's doing is bullying reporters, beating up on America's closest friends and allies, and frankly, seeming cowed by China.
Tell me about the Taiwan thing. How big a deal is it? There's two. The one is a practical issue, and that is that the U.S. has maintained a very heavy naval presence and military presence in Asia. For a lot of reasons, but also in part because we have an agreement that if China were to invade Taiwan, the United States has some nuanced commitment to defend Taiwan. But the military is not there right now. They're in the Middle East.
That is 100% the case, and China knows it. China knows that with every day of the Trump presidency, the U.S. is getting weaker. The U.S. is distracted by a war of choice, which is tying up the U.S. military, which is raising prices at home and weakening the president because of that, which has divided the United States from its allies. And what to me is really concerning about the president's reticence on Taiwan is I think that kind of ambiguity, that perception that surely Beijing has right now, that they can manipulate President Trump, I think it makes the world a more dangerous place. Because if you're in Beijing right now, you're thinking, this is a guy we can manipulate. And you may be thinking that means it would be smart for us to do something before 2028. And that would be terrible for Taiwan and terrible for the world.
So that's interesting. Before 2028. So that brings me to my next question. Donald Trump has broken a lot of major organizations or weakened organizations. Some of them are American organizations. Some of them are things like NATO. When there's a different president who doesn't do that, who doesn't want to break alliances and break international organizations, can America get right back to the table? Can they pull up their chair and say, we're back and things are going back to the way they used to be? Or have our allies, including Canada, decided that the future has to look different?
Ali, I really hope that America can mend its relationship with its allies. And I hope that because I think all of us, the world's democracies, will be a lot stronger if the U.S. is on team democracy. And I also think, Canadians, Europeans, we know America is bigger than one man, even if that one man is the president. And by the way, we like America. We admire America and Americans. So I like to think there is a way back, but it's getting harder and harder every day.
Help me understand how this goes, because obviously a country like Canada and other European countries, they do have to trade with China. We all trade with China. We trade a lot with China. But as a result of the difficulties with America since the second Trump presidency, Canada, for instance, has increased its level of trade and its intent to do more with China. And that makes some Canadians uncomfortable. It makes Americans uncomfortable. But it's a fact of life that if you want to confront China, you've got to have a sort of an allied approach to this thing. If you don't, countries are going to start going it alone.
Ali, you are 100% correct. And, the irony of the situation is America actually needs its allies today more than it has ever done. These alliances were established after the Second World War when America was at its peak power. And that is when America was supporting its allies, was seeking to build this web of friendship. Today, America's relative economic weight in the world is declining, and the behavior is absolutely perverse. Now is a time when America needs its friends. And what America is actually doing, rather than rallying a coalition of friends to support America, including in, I would say, ensuring that China plays by the rules the rest of us play by, whether those are rules of territorial integrity or rules of trade. America could be rallying the free world to do that, but instead America is pushing its friends into the arms of China. It's really hard for me to understand why that is in the interests of the United States and of Americans.
Christian, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to continue the conversation on the other side. You are one of a number of people who are persona non grata in Russia as a result of your support for Ukraine and your own background, your Ukrainian heritage. I want to talk to you about the uptick in violence that Russia has imposed on Ukraine this week, and talk about the future of American democracy. We're going to take a quick break. We'll talk on the other side. Here's a statement that would have been unthinkable at any time from the end of World War II until Donald Trump. The German Chancellor Friedrich Merz said today, quote, "I am a great admirer of America. My admiration isn't growing at the moment, so I wouldn't recommend to my children today that they go to the U.S., get an education there, and work there, simply because of a social climate that has suddenly developed there," end quote. Just last month, Chancellor Merz says Donald Trump was being humiliated by Iran in negotiations about an end to Trump's war. Germany, of course, unconditionally surrendered to the United States, ending World War II, and it was America that showed an act of mercy and remarkable economic prowess in the Marshall Plan to help the country that waged war on democracy to rebuild. Germany was where an American president stood at the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin in 1963 when the German people were being split in half by communism and said, "I am a Berliner." And in 1987, when an American president shouted, "Tear down this wall," and not that long afterward, they did. And where in 2008, 200,000 people flooded the streets to see the future president, Barack Obama, speak about freedom and partnership. And now we have come to this. The German chancellor warns his kids away from looking to America. Chrystia Freeland, the former Deputy Prime Minister of Canada, is back with us. Chrystia, between two fellow Canadians, this is so weird, right? Because we both grew up with America as our biggest neighbor and most important partner, a country to which we looked to, we vacationed in. You and I both worked parts of our careers in the United States. It's so strange to have a break with one of your closest allies.
It's strange and it's dangerous. It's dangerous for America's allies and it's dangerous for America itself. You know, Ali, you are absolutely right to highlight those comments from Friedrich Merz. They're even more shocking than you made them sound, because Merz is probably the most pro-American leader in Europe. He used to work for BlackRock. He is a conservative. He was the head of an organization called Atlantische Brücke, which means Atlantic Bridge, the bridge between Germany and North America. In 2018, he actually, as head of that organization, gave me an award for furthering transatlantic relations because Canada did a trade deal with Europe. So he has devoted so much of his life to building that transatlantic relationship. It's one of the main things he stands for. And to have him say, "I don't think America is a place for my kids anymore," that is huge.
Let's talk a little about, a lot of people don't know this, but Canada is home to the largest diaspora of Ukrainians for a lot of very interesting reasons that go back to the 1930s. You're one of them. You are a member of that diaspora. You have fought for freedom and democracy in Ukraine for a long time, and for that you have you're not welcome in Russia. Russia has upped its attacks on Ukraine this week. There have been some brutal attacks over the last few days, thousands of drones and missiles. Where are we in this war?
Well, Ali, this has been a pretty grim time, and you've talked about some worrying things so far in your show. So I'm going to offer a little bit of good news. Against all odds and contradicting the predictions of experts from the very beginning, experts said that Kyiv was going to fall in 3 weeks. Ukraine is actually holding Russia to a stalemate. It may even be winning. And it is doing that because the Ukrainians have invented an entirely new way of war. They have invented drone warfare. You see the Gulf states actually turning to Ukraine to help defend themselves from Iran. And Ukrainians are building their own drones. They are building their own ballistic missiles. They are now capable of striking 1,500 kilometers into Russia. And they call these missile attacks our own sanction program. Because with those Ukrainian deep strike attacks, Ukraine has either damaged or destroyed up to 40% of Russia's oil refining capacity. That is an example to me of democracy working. And I think that we should all be really inspired by what Ukraine is doing. And we should recognize that Ukraine, it's not just a charity case. Ukraine is a powerful ally that can help defend Europe, and indeed is today defending Europe.
Christy, can I ask you, day 76, I think it is, of this war in Iran? Wars tend to get unpopular over time. Rarely do they start this unpopular. It is quite likely this is an illegal war because in the first 60 days, the president needed to ask Congress. Congress does not apparently care that the president didn't ask, so it's not been granted. The president doesn't have war powers. Sometimes he calls it a war, sometimes he doesn't call it a war. But something is happening in Iran that feels like a war, and the Strait of Hormuz is closed. What's your sense of how this ends?
Well, I'll tell you what is happening right now, which is this is pummeling regular Americans. Gas prices are high and they're going to get higher. This is hitting food prices. Something that not a lot of people talk about is that fertilizer is really being hit, and that is going to increase the price of food around the world. It is hitting aluminum. If you are a person who likes a beer or likes a can of pop, that is going to be getting more expensive because of this war.
Is there a way out of this? I mean, it doesn't seem obvious. Donald Trump keeps claiming victory, which creates a problem because it doesn't actually get us to victory, or even a ceasefire or a peace deal.
Well, you know what is really perverse, Ali, is this war may actually end up leaving Iran and the Ayatollahs, who are terrible, who massacred their own people in the weeks before this war. They may end up in a stronger position than before the war began. It is entirely possible that Iran and its nuclear program will be stronger after this war than they were before. And as you have pointed out, Iran has discovered a whole new weapon, and that is control over the Straits of Hormuz. Which
remain closed. I wonder whether when Donald Trump declares victory there, it'll be because these straits, which were not closed 76 days ago, will be reopened. Christy, good to see you as always. Thank you for being with us. Christopher Freeland is the former Deputy Prime Minister of Canada. All right, coming up, no other president has blurred the line between national and personal interest more than Donald Trump. I'll talk about that next with the former Labor Secretary, Robert Reich, after the break. There has never been, in the history of America, a president who used the office to enrich himself, his family, and his pals as much as or as blatantly as Donald Trump has. Whether it's holding the G20 at his own golf club in Florida, or hawking Elon Musk's cars on the White House lawn, or selling Trump-branded Bibles made in China, which were exempt from Trump tariffs, it's never been clear where the line is between the national interest of the United States and the interest of the person currently occupying the Oval Office. Here's another one. Donald Trump went to China for a summit with the president of China, America's foremost geopolitical rival, and traveling alongside the president was his son, Eric Trump, the executive who leads the Trump family business. The New York Times reports the company, known as the Trump Organization, has flirted with Chinese business deals over the years, raising the question of whether his presence could blur the lines between government business, and private enterprise. Now, Eric Trump posted today, "I have zero business interests in China. No properties, no investments, nothing. I joined this trip for one reason, as a loving son who adores my father and wouldn't miss being by his side for this incredible moment. During the bilateral talks, Lara Trump and I went to the Great Wall of China." And there is, by the way, no evidence that Eric Trump conducted any negotiations during this trip. But the Times also reports that according to public financial disclosures filed last year, Donald Trump still owns dozens of trademarks in China. And then there's this reporting from the Financial Times this week. Eric Trump is joining his father on a state visit to Beijing, while a company linked to him and the U.S. president's family explores a deal with a Chinese chip maker that American lawmakers have warned is connected to the ruling Communist Party. Las Vegas-based fintech Alt5 Sigma, which has financial links to the Trump family's World Liberty Financial crypto business, last month signed a memorandum of understanding with Nano Labs to build data centers in the United States. Now, again, it's important to note the Financial Times does not report that Eric Trump himself negotiated that agreement, but Eric Trump simultaneously represents the president's family and the president's business empire. So where's the line? And how can we forget other foreign governments, especially those less democratic ones? How can we expect them to understand and respect that line? This kind of stuff used to outrage small c conservatives, Republicans. Not anymore. The Republican Congressman Jim Jordan was asked directly about this on CNN yesterday.
Do you think it's fair for Eric Trump to be on this trip with his,
I think it's
his father, the president?
Yeah, I think it's certainly fine for people to travel with the president on a state visit like this. I think that happens all the time. So I don't have a problem at all with the first family traveling with the president of the United States.
Even despite his business ventures when it comes to World Liberty Financial and the Trump Organization, you don't have any issues with that?
I don't have any issues at all.
And maybe that's the biggest shift of all, because whatever ethics constraints once existed around the Trump Organization during the first administration, many of them have eroded in the second. The Trump Organization is once again expanding its foreign business interests. Trump's son-in-law, by the way, Jared Kushner, and Trump ally Steve Witkoff, these two guys seem to be going around the world trying to make peace or developments or whatever. They've both developed lucrative international relationships while also operating in diplomatic or quasi-diplomatic roles tied to U.S. foreign policy. Jared Kushner has his own private equity firm funded mostly by Middle Eastern money, while the Witkoff family is boosting its wealth with investments connected to the Trumps and to Elon Musk. And while peace in the Ukraine and the Middle East have not been achieved, profits connected to Trump world appear to be booming. And all of this is happening while Americans are paying more for gas and groceries as Donald Trump's war of choice with Iran drags on. Joining us now is Robert Reich, who served as the Secretary of Labor under President Clinton. He's a professor of public policy at UC Berkeley. He's a co-founder of Inequality Media. And, you know, Robert, you're an expert on a lot of things. I don't think you're an expert on corruption and grift and government doing this, because we haven't seen this happen this way in the past. It's kind of remarkable. I probably only listed a quarter of the things I could have listed that seem untoward about the dealings between the president and the president's friends and other countries.
Ellie, I think one of the most important themes here is that in previous administrations, and I've been involved in, actually worked for 3 presidents, 1 Republican, in previous administrations, you have had a specialized group of people in the State Department, diplomats, people who have developed an understanding of a particular country like Iran or like China. And they really do have a very central role to play in American foreign policy and what a president does when he visits one of these places or when he makes decisions about going to war, such as Iran. This administration does not have that. This administration instead has the president's son-in-law, Steve Witkoff, who's another real estate developer, a president's friend, a bunch of CEOs who were part of the delegation that went to China with the president. But where are the diplomats? Where are the people who are supposed to know what is going on? There is really no distinction at all in this administration between the personal business interests of various people who are advising the president, including his family, and America's supposed national interest. But the fact is that there are conflicts of interest. This is what conflicts of interest means. It means that there are ulterior motives. And that is potentially dangerous for the United States.
Or at least there could be, right? We don't know, but we don't know that they're not. If at least when you have rules and you follow those conflict of interest rules, what you do in many cases is eliminate the potential for things to be seen as conflicts of interest. But we're spending the week talking about this pool, the reflecting pool that Donald Trump had redone and bragged about the fact that it was his guy who he got in a no-bid contract. At what point and how? Yeah, I mean, at what point and how?
No-bid contract, and that's the important point. You see, the potential conflicts of interest create distrust. They generate distrust. If we don't believe that we're absolutely dealing with a government that is working for us, if we know that there are ulterior motives, there are grifting side deals going on, then how can we possibly trust the outcomes of what our government does? That's
so. This
the
is interesting because
fundamental bottom line.
you look at this. You follow the University of Michigan Consumer Sentiment Survey, which is at its lowest point since 1952. Now, I would argue, and you know these things better than I do, that the economy is not worse now than it was at various other points between now and 1952. But in all of those other times, including the financial crisis of 2008, you had a feeling that the government was working with you to try and solve this problem. Here we have this feeling, this distrust that the government is working with us to solve problems. And in fact, in the case of the tariffs and in the case of the war in Iran, they're actively working against us. Our prices are higher. Our cost of living is higher because of tariffs and the war in Iran.
And I think that the consumer sentiment does reflect increasing distrust and increasing concern that, in fact, this government is not trying to make gas more affordable or anything else more affordable. It's through its tariffs. It's using the tariffs to get a better deal for what? For whom? It's using the war in Iran to do exactly what? We don't even hear what the objective is. We know that there are a lot of deals going on. We know that there's a lot of money at stake. But if the public doesn't trust that that money is going to be spent well, that it's going to be spent in the public interest, then we've got, not only consumer sentiment going down, but we have overall trust in government and trust in this particular government at rock bottom.
We also have a situation where CEOs travel with presidents on these deals, and they're often trade-oriented deals, and that in itself is not the problem. But you mentioned the lack of the diplomats and the lack of the experts, and you could say the same thing about Iran, right? I remember calling Ernie Moniz at the beginning of this war with Iran and saying, hey, can you come on my show and talk about the nuclear stuff? And he said, I could, but why? That's not actually what they're discussing. This isn't a deal that has experts around the table who are discussing how to contain Iran's nuclear ambitions. It's entirely something else.
Well, you use the word deal, and I think that's really very interesting and very central. The question is, and that was the name of Trump's famous book, The Art of the Deal. Who is at the table? Who is the deal benefiting? Is the deal for just the private individuals and the private businesses sitting around the table? Or is the deal about America? Is it about this country? Is it about the interest of people in this country? And I think that the problem is that these deals are being made by deal makers that don't have any particular connection, officially or even unofficially, to the public interest in the United States.
Robert, good to see you. As always, thank you for being with us tonight. Robert Reich is the former Secretary of Labor under President Bill Clinton. All right, coming up, what did Donald Trump take away from his summit in China? That China has a ballroom. Literally. We'll discuss that and more with Congressman Maxwell Frost next. Donald Trump came out of his summit with the president of China with a demand for the American people. Quote, China has a ballroom, and so should the USA. And he posted a picture of himself with President Xi. The post perfectly captures how unserious Donald Trump is. America meets with its biggest geopolitical and military rival, and one which is an ally of Iran, where the Strait of Hormuz is still closed, and Trump focuses on the ballroom. It's not just Trump himself. As former Obama diplomat Brett Bruen pointed out on social media, quote, not a single China expert. POTUS would normally have at least one NSC state official to provide briefings, underlines how utterly unprepared he is for meetings with Xi. I don't think China was unprepared or understaffed with experts, but that didn't sit well with one of the members of Donald Trump's China delegation, the White House Communications Director, Stephen Chung, who was front and center, literally in the front line on the steps of the arrival ceremony. He delivered a characteristically foul-mouthed, name-calling reply, but no facts to refute the fact that there were no China experts on the Trump team in China. Stephen Chung is part of the Trump brain trust that has been making a joke of the war in Iran.
You can't conceive of what I'm capable of!
Finishing this fight.
Yeah, I'm thinking I'm back.
I'm here to fight for truth and justice in the American way.
I am the danger.
I think the kids call that cringe. But by the way, they don't post so much about Iran now that it's day 76 and this war is still going on. This extremely online memeified communication from the Trump administration is clearly designed to appeal to young men, whom Trump won with 56% of that vote in 2024. But a year and a half later, those young men aren't liking the memes so much anymore. According to the spring 2026 Yale Youth poll, Donald Trump's approval among young male voters under 35 is plummeting. And it seems unlikely to improve, with the top issue for 81% of all young voters being the cost of living. And then look at what's next, corruption. And look at what's next, democracy. And look at what's next, healthcare, which this administration has cut. And look at what's next, housing. Joining us now is the Democratic Congressman Maxwell Frost of Florida. He's a member of the House Oversight Committee, and he is certainly our favorite young man to come on this show on a regular basis. Congressman, nice to see you. Young people are not an anomaly. They actually have real concerns about this world, and they were made to believe by this administration and its partisans that they will somehow solve their problem, and they're solving none of their problems.
100%. And, you know, a lot of times there's a lot of politicians, and Donald Trump is the top one that thinks all you need are AI memes, funny videos, go on podcasts and stuff like that, and you'll be able to reach out to young people. And look, I don't profess to speak for all young people in this country, but I can tell you that young people don't want memes. They want housing. They want healthcare. They want a good paying job where they can pay for their for everything that they have in life. And the fact of the matter is, for young people, it is uniquely difficult right now to be a young person becoming an adult, trying to accumulate wealth to live and pay for your bills. It is uniquely difficult right now. And we don't want memes. They want money, right, in their pockets. They want healthcare. They want affordable housing, and none of that exists. And Donald Trump takes this trip where it's an opportunity for him to speak with China, to use diplomacy, to try to figure out how can we reopen Strait of Hormuz, how can we get past this entire debacle that he put us in that's driving up gas prices. But instead of that, he uses it to talk about his ballroom that he's asking us for $1 billion to build.
Which nobody asked for. Nobody asked for this ballroom. Nobody needed it. After the very unfortunate shooting at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, he claimed it was all about safety. But let's go back to last November, the elections of last November, and various elections since then. But New York City, right here, Mamdani, winning with an overwhelming plurality of young people who couldn't care less whether he was a Democratic Socialist or what, any of that stuff. He said that he would make your rent go down. You know, which New Yorkers pay like 60% of their, young people here pay 60% of their income in rent. That's what registers. They want a better life.
Yeah, I think a lot of people learn the wrong lessons from a lot of these elections. And I think a lot of people saw Zoran's win and said, okay, well, all we got to do is make good videos. And if we make good videos, we'll be able to win the young people. And of course, look, it's important for us to do videos, to go speak in different places, to have the good quality. The medium is important, but don't forget that the message, the policy, what you're saying you're going to do is just as important, if not, I would say much more important. Young people voted for Zoran, not just because he made videos saying what he was going to do, but because what he was saying he was going to do resonated with them. And they said, wow, if someone actually did that, it would change my life and make my life a lot easier. And that's what we really have to, you know, we have to focus on that. It's, of course, how we deliver the message, but what we're saying we're going to do and then doing it, that's the key. Because what I'm telling people is, in this moment, especially when you have an opposition as stupid as Donald Trump that's going to do all this horrible stuff, it can, I don't want to say easy, nothing's easy, but gaining political power, it goes back and forth in American politics. But keeping it, that's the challenge. And that's where we really have to deliver. And so Donald Trump, he's all over the place.
All over the place. Let's pull up that list again of what the poll showed about what young people care about, and the cost of living and affordability, 81%. These numbers are crazy, Congressman. 81% of people, again, wouldn't believe that today is Friday. We couldn't get that agreement. The number two issue, it edges out democracy by a little bit. 75% of young people say corruption is their second biggest issue. Corruption. I don't even know that like polls in normal polls, like in normal administrations, because you don't generally think that your federal government is a central source of corruption. And that seems to be the case now.
Exactly. And the important thing about these numbers is they don't live within a vacuum, right? I would venture to say that part of the reason why so many young people are saying we got to deal with corruption is because they see the direct connection between the fact that they can't afford a damn thing in their life, that they have no money, that they don't own a damn thing, and they see that connection to the fact that billionaires and corporations can spend unlimited amounts of money in our politics. Then they see their members of Congress buying and trading stock. Then they see and they see a corrupt Supreme Court. They see the president use a state trip to essentially try to get a ballroom with taxpayer money. They see all this and they say, no wonder my life sucks. I mean, like, no wonder I have done everything they told me to do. I went to school, I got student debt, I did this and that. I can't find a full-time job that pays my bills because everything's too expensive. And so I think that's why you see corruption so high up there and doesn't live in a vacuum. They see how it's all connected. And Donald Trump is really putting it on full display right now.
But the irony is that Donald Trump ran on affordability and immigration and no foreign wars. He's underwater on all of the foreign war thing was just a lie, turns out. And the other two he's underwater on. Even on immigration, he's underwater on these were his signature things. So I guess here's my question to you. Democrats have to campaign on affordability this time. The last guy people voted for on affordability did a dirty. How did Democrats make sure that they can say, we'll actually deal with your affordability problems?
Well, obviously, like the core difference is that he lied, right? And obviously he's a billionaire looking out for himself, his family, and his friends. But the thing, and I think the thing that you're getting at that's so important is the lesson here is you can say the right things in the election, you can win the election. And less than 2 years later, the voters can completely turn on you if you have not delivered. So that's why what's important right now, and we're working on this in the House Democratic Caucus, is figuring out what's our message, what are we running on? But it's the thing that we run on, that we win on, and then the most important one that we do. And doing those three things are the most important. It's the most important part of keeping the political power that we need. And so my hope as we're in this process is we come up with what is that affirmative agenda? What are the 3 to 5 things we're telling the American people? Vote us in the power, we're going to do it. We get in there and then we do it. And then we put the pressure on Donald Trump for the next year and a half saying, hey, we passed this proposal to make sure you have health care. We passed this proposal to deal with the housing crisis. It is sitting on his desk. And we take that energy to 2028, take the presidency, and go from there. So I'm optimistic, but you're 100% right. It's not enough to just run on it. You got to do it because right now people don't believe either party. And I think we have an opportunity as Democrats to change that in the next several cycles.
Congressman, you give me some hope. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. I need a little of that. Congressman Maxwell Frost is a member of the House Oversight Committee. We appreciate your time as always.